And I was one of the team of 6 or 7 developers from India who were part of the core developer protocol team itself. We've seen the whole narrative reach the hype, the trough, and now the plateau of acceptance. So what we hear in the news and all the noise that is out there, that's what I'd like to call the consumer metaverse. Now it's being popularized by the term of digital twins in some sense. Understand or realize what you'll be getting into and accept that reality and learn to live with that reality.
Hello viewers, welcome back to the latest episode of GIBS IRE Talks podcast, powered by GIBS Business School, a place where innovation meets inspiration. Well, I always address the students that doing business is an art. And in India, you all agree to the fact that of late business has been more vibrant and business has been more dynamic, right? So as an educators, we always feel that the real learning for students is always beyond the 4 walls of the classroom. So in that sense, I really appreciate such initiatives where we get a chance to meet the finest of the finest entrepreneurs who will share the journey with you all. And that's where we try to bridge gap between academia and academics, or I would say would like to link in the theory into practice. So in this regard, today we have one of the Shark Tank fames. Of late we had many expertise who came here and shared their journey, and today I am all set to welcome Mr. Yuvaraj, the founder of CloudWorks and Thinqbot. On behalf of all my viewers, I extend a hearty welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, I was really impressed in your pitch, which I would say one of my favorite. So before I get into that, could you please share your journey with us? I mean, your school days, your lifestyle back then, how it was?
Definitely. So I grew up in the city of Meerut, that's 70 kilometers from Delhi. Had a bit of interest in computing and robotics, I would say, since my 6th or 7th grade itself, because I was fortunate enough to get a PC to play around and tinker with. So instead of going down the gaming route, I was more inquisitive in what is and how it is working in some sense.
Right.
So that was my first bent into understanding some of these aspects, and that's how I got into programming at a very young age, I would say, some say. My first entrepreneurial stint even sort of happened in school itself, where in 11th and 12th, I started a computers organization in the city of Meerut, that is as back as 2005 in some sense, when owning a computer used to be a big deal, but we found some 10-20 bunch of enthusiasts in Meerut who like programming, who like gaming, and a lot of other computer related stuff, and we created a sort of a club. That became a movement, and that computer event is still going on in our school and in the city in that regards. So I knew that I would do something with computers. It's just that I didn't have the clarity back then in school that what would it be. So then got into college, was fortunate enough to get into a good college, Punjab University College, Chandigarh. Studied Bachelor of Engineering in IT over there, and that's where I got the interest in robotics in some sense. Prior to that, I was more of, I would say, a software or a coding guy in some sense, but now I got interested in robotics in some sense. In 2009, I even created one of these IoT sort of projects where, just out of laziness, I basically wanted to control my switchboard in the room from my laptop, basically. So I created
This is where all the business ideas begin, starting something lazy and then you convert it to into something really big time.
somewhat in some sense. So ended up being a decent enough project, I would say. People were impressed because IoT wasn't a term back then in some sense. It was machine to machine communication. That's Absolutely. What M2M was the term that, or the vocabulary that we were using back then. Right. So, but I never thought that it could become a product. Again, maybe due to the naivety of being in college, or because the term around startups and the whole notion of starting your own thing wasn't a culture back then, I would say. People were still looking at getting into a reputed company, getting a good engineering job, and taking things from there on. Yeah.
What was your parents' reaction to this when they understood that you wanted to get into your business of your own?
So, to be honest, I didn't tell my parents for the first 6 months. Once there was some stability with Thinqbot and we had a couple of purchase orders from builders, that's when I announced to my parents that I've been running the startup in some sense.
What was your first reaction?
So initially they were kind of confused that why is it that they were very, like, if you look at it from a third person perspective, things will look very good. That, okay, it's a good cushy job at Cisco. It's a good career path, good trajectory. I was in the core development team even. We were developing a protocol that, so you would have noticed that your phone call quality got a lot better around the 2011, 12, 13 era. That's primarily because of one of the protocols that Cisco developed and implemented. TMIP v6 protocols, primarily for Airtel and a lot of telecom providers. And I was one of the team of 6 or 7 developers from India who were part of the core developer protocol team itself.
Great.
So in all regards, things are looking really great. Why is the need to start up in that sense?
True.
So I honestly explained it to my parents that the need for startup again was out of boredom. And it wasn't purely like a lackadaisical reason. I took a calculated risk as well, because I calculated my growth trajectory at Cisco in terms of even merit or let's say some seniority. What is my career within 10 years at Cisco versus what is my career if I take this path instead? So I did the whole math around Excel. I did my year-on-year predictions.
That's a great beginning.
And actually showed that data to my father, so that he's at least assured that I'm not just taking something out of the blue. It's a calculated risk in the end that I'm taking, and I just had to justify it to them.
Fantastic. You tend to listen to a lot of buzzword these days. People talk about technology, AI, metaverse, blockchain. Right. So before I get into your company, could you throw some light on your product, which is metaverse? Some understanding for all of us.
Definitely. So the whole notion of metaverse, I would say, is very loosely related to 3D.
Okay.
So anything that is 3D is becoming a metaverse solution in some sense. Now, the means of accessing this 3D solution is what differentiates the type of metaverse. So what we hear in the news and all the noise that is out there, that's what I'd like to call the consumer metaverse.
Okay.
Which are often accessed by most of these head-mounted displays, which are your AR, VR, or XR, or mixed reality devices, where you are immersed in this concept 3D environment, and you can interact with avatars, you can interact with objects, you can basically do meetings, you can have concerts, and a lot of other stuff that basically you can do virtually in a 3D game in some sense. But the traditional nuances of wearing a head-mounted display for a longer time is what is stopping this movement from really becoming a mass movement. Whereas if you look at the other narrative, which is the enterprise metaverse or the industrial metaverse, that is something that's been shaping really well over the past couple of years in the background. Now it's being popularized by the term of digital twins in some sense. So this is where 3D and some real-time use case become tangible and become more realistic. For example, what is happening inside a factory? The whole process of an assembly line, if we take let's say a car assembly plant for that matter. So everything right from arranging the parts to the final car, seeing all the processes in 3D, simulating those processes, understanding their bottlenecks, that is the new evolution of this enterprise or industrial software, and that's been shaping up really well over the past 4 years.
Right.
So this is the two narrative, consumer versus enterprise or industrial metaverse.
Right. Could you please take us through CloudWorks? Now, what was your idea before you started this?
Yeah. So the seed for the idea actually started in my previous company, Thinqbot itself.
Okay.
In 2016, we introduced the world's first, and till date, the only 3D smart home solution, where we basically give you a whole 3D application of your home or your building, and you can control all the IoT devices in 3D as a game of sorts in some sense. So that is, if we let's say combine 3D and IoT, and we give a consumer application output to it, so you get 3D smart homes. In 2019, when Thinqbot was in M&A talks with Satya Group, so I started exploring that what is this combination also worth in other domains. So if we take 3D and IoT narrative and we combine it with industries, we get digital twins.
Okay.
So that's the seed of CloudWorks in some sense, where this whole narrative of combining 3D and IoT and data for enterprises, for businesses, how can that be gamified? Similarly, what we did for residential and consumer homes. That's how I started CloudWorks in some sense.
Okay.
Over the course of time, we saw the whole metaverse hype movement, and now back to the whole digital twin movement in some sense. So we've seen the whole narrative reach the hype, the trough, and now the plateau of acceptance. So I would say it's a great journey so far.
Fantastic. I wish it continues the same in the long run.
Yeah, thank you.
What's your team size, and how do you manage your people?
Yeah, so the total team size is 18.
Okay.
All of us are technical. So
right.
it's the same technology talent that you may find in a gaming company or a VFX company.
Okay.
Because in a simplified term, we're creating games for enterprises and industries that way. So typical to a gaming, let's say, tech stack, we have 3D artists, 3D generalists, 3D animators, 3D developers, along with front-end, back-end engineers. So that's the whole technology stack of the team.
Right. And who are your major target audience from CloudWorks?
So our solution is purely a B2B play.
Okay.
We are rolling a B2C solution, but that is next quarter somewhere on the lines where we'll be launching this. But currently, most of the focus is purely a B2B play.
Okay.
Where our focus, the domains that we're focusing on are automotive, warehousing, manufacturing, industrial automation, logistics, supply chain, airport, shipping terminals, some of those aspects. Basically, any business process which has some real-time complex data, which is too hard to visualize in a 2D dashboard. That is where we really fit.
Okay. Now, if I talk from the business enterprise point of view, I mean, what is the top 3 advantages that they would get from this?
Yes, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. A lot of people are just happy with the hype, but even when we show it to the customers, even they don't know, to be honest, why or how do they want digital twins.
Exactly.
Because it's a new technology. It's still very difficult to figure out how the tangible benefits can be reflected to your end result or the end process that you want.
Yeah.
So this is eventually a journey in some sense, where we start off with a very small and a limited process, and we define some killer use cases, where there are 3 key metrics, what we call the North Star metrics in some sense, which are, let's say, increasing the total output of the assembly line, or reducing the idle time of the cobot arms or some other aspect, or increasing the productivity by X amount. Now, we create focused digital twin solutions around these metrics, so that at least to the entire organization, we are first able to justify why digital twins are important. So once we are able to achieve that, that is when the whole tangible benefits come into play, which are, once you have the whole thing in 3D, everybody right from the factory worker to the CXO are having the same visibility of the problem. So issues are solved at 1/3, let's say, the amount of time it would take in the typical and the traditional sense. There is greater visibility of processes which can be simulated, which could not be happen in the traditional senses. For example, you can simulate what would be my worker's behavior or my worker's shift if I have, let's say, a workload of 1,000 more orders coming in. So all those aspects, even for a historical or even a future timeline, can be simulated in 3D solutions, which again is not possible in the traditional solutions. And naturally, then the third angle is, once we have this entire machine or the gears in place, then the whole system becomes very efficient. So you notice your team is behaving a lot more productive. Your time to market is reducing in a lot of other aspects. So there are other non-tangible benefits that come into place once the solution is implemented.
So I would see, even though it's a very new, very unique product, can you take us through the competition level within India, or do you have any top players from abroad who can be a greatest challenge to you?
Yeah. So the narrative actually is around how digital twin solutions are being implemented. It's basically a combination of a couple of layers that are bundled together to eventually give this solution. Now, the most fundamental layer in this is the 3D platform or the 3D engine. How it is being, like how the whole 3D application is being consumed by the user. Now, that is where our play is in some sense, because we eventually are a platform or a web-based platform for digital twins. So our competition are also similar platforms, which are the likes of NVIDIA, Unity, Unreal, Bentley iTwin platform, and even Johnson's Control for that matter. In India, there aren't any platform plays as such, but there are companies who I would say are the next layer in this solution ecosystem, which are using one of these platforms and servicing or selling to the end clients, creating some bundle or some use case and basically maintaining this. So they are playing the role of system integrators. So they are not necessarily our competitors. I would say they are our enablers, because they are spreading the word, getting the word out for digital twins in the ecosystem.
Right. Yeah. So now that I asked you a question on competition, if I have to ask you about CloudWorks' top strength and the opportunities that you're going to see in the coming years, what would that be?
So I'm a staunch believer of this notion that by 2030, anything about our work that can be done in 3D will be done in 3D. So digital twin being the starting point of this narrative.
Right.
So and this is one thing that I'm not the only one stating this statement out loud. A lot of other big names are also jumping on this bandwagon in some sense. Even this year in NVIDIA's GTC event, there was a very large dedicated segment around digital twins and how NVIDIA is shaping the future of digital twins in that way.
Lovely.
So it's even the big names that are jumping onto this, and I definitely see this becoming a very common topic across boardrooms, at least for the next 1 or 2 years.
Okay.
Where now we'll see people getting serious about implementing digital twins. 2025 would be the time towards the end where people will start seeing a very big rise in the whole implementation of how this 3D is even being impacted in our common day-to-day solutions.
True. So I think now that we have witnessed the pandemic and other things, and most of them shifting to the work from home aspects and all that. So where this metaverse can fit in over there in the coming years, if technology will take away a lot of the mundane and the regular physical work.
Yes, yes.
So do you see that as a challenge?
So the challenge, I would say, is still in the form factor that the user consumes the technology in. For the head-mounted displays, the form factor, if it's reduced to a level where it's as light and as simple as wearing spectacles, so that would be the, I would say, the landmark shift when these solutions will become mainstream. Because naturally, digitization and immersive digitization is the future. And due to the limitations of geographical events, pandemic events, and other related events, people will not be always available to go to the places or reach the aspects of the venues that they always want to. And even the cost of logistics is naturally going to increase over time. So people are, and a lot of upstarts are going to look for cheaper alternatives. So immersive digitization is going to become the movement. It's just waiting for a movement when form factors are reduced to a more, I would say, a more human level, where it's consumed at a point where consuming more than 4 or 5 hours per day is natural.
True, true. In this situation, the ongoing trends, which I use some of the buzzwords in the business these days, where do you see CloudWorks maybe 10 years down the line?
Yeah, that's a good question actually. To be honest, I see it as an acquisition. I don't think if we follow our simple trajectory, long businesses will let
Any
us
plans crossing the national borders?
Definitely. We are already actually active across 7+ countries.
Lovely.
And it's primarily due to the network of channel partners and system integrators how we've been able to scale this.
Great. There's a big vision out there, and I really wish you best luck.
Thank you.
Well, I happened to see your the pitch in the Shark Tank. I personally loved it in terms of the confidence, in terms of the clarity you had on the numbers as well.
Thank you.
Can you just run through us the experience in the Shark Tank? Most of my viewers would be excited to know that.
It was a great experience, to be honest.
You looked nervous in the initial stage?
I was nervous in the backstage actually.
Okay.
Largely because I didn't know when was my turn coming, because I was kept waiting for almost an hour and a half in the backstage, so with just a glass of water actually.
Okay.
So that was the only part, but once the whole thing, or the moment where we entered the stage and just stood in front of the judges, I just took a moment to recollect, because I knew the nuances of my business. I know what I'm pitching, and I've done a lot of pitches throughout my career. So it was it's just a different medium when you're pitching in front of the camera, that every word needs to be perfect. That was the only, I would say, moment of anxiety that I had. And once I overcame that, it was pretty smooth after that.
Great. I mean, what was your expectation before you got into the center of the Shark Tank? You expected 1 or 2 sharks to help you out, or what was it? What was the mindset behind it?
So to be honest, so the bare minimum goal that I had was to convert Namita as a client in some sense. So I wasn't expecting investments actually. So it just became a bonus that we got Namita as a POC client, and we got the investments as well.
Right. So what was the immediate reaction after that?
It was actually quite great. I informed everybody that how we got the deal, and because it's been almost 3 days that during the backstage we were going to those, it was near Yash Raj studios where the whole set was being filmed. So every day from morning to 9 we would be there, just waiting for our couple of turns to run the script, then wait, run the script and wait, and just do this process for the next 3 days. So at least running or completing that process was more important and quite actually good.
Well, I've been a great follower of the Shark Tank seasons of all the 3. And what I've realized they're very particular on the numbers. I saw the pitch on the numbers as well. We are so well prepared. How was the background preparation with regard to the financials and commercials?
I think it just comes naturally being a founder in some sense. You anyway have to be thorough with the numbers.
Absolutely.
Because that's anyway the thing that you are personally monitoring about your business as well. So
true.
I think thoroughness about the numbers, that's one thing that's also expected, that's why, from all these investors in one sense, because if you're not thorough with the numbers, it gives the impression you're not serious enough in considering growing these numbers in some sense.
Great. So we spoke about the future, we spoke about competition. What do you think the challenges would be, immediate challenges that CloudWorks would face?
Yeah. So the biggest challenge I'm facing right now is in hiring, actually.
Okay.
So the talent pool, especially for 3D and the tech stack that we are working with, that is very limited in India.
Okay. What's your current recruitment strategy? What do you do?
Yeah, so we are primarily a JavaScript-based front-end platform.
Okay.
It's using 3JS and WebGL, if I'm being a bit more technical in that regard. So 3JS, WebGL, WebAssembly. So it's very hard to find a developer who knows this plus IoT.
Okay.
So we are finding freshers who are good in, let's say, one discipline, and we are cross-training them across multiple disciplines. That's eventually our, I would say, the first couple of training program that we internally have as a company as well, where all the initial hires work really closely with myself and my CTO Kaushik. We train them on all the tools, all the procedures, at least get them familiarized with our 3D pipeline. And within the 3rd to 6th month, that's when they become really productive.
Okay.
So even if you're not finding the right skill set, we find somebody who's really good vertically deep in one skill, and primarily JavaScript.
Okay.
And on that note, I would say that even Jeff Atwood, who is one of the co-founders of Stack Overflow, he's been famous for this quote that if anything can be developed in JavaScript, it will be developed in JavaScript. Wow. So I guess that's one tool that everybody should know.
Right. I mean, do you have any in-house training department which conducts training for these freshers?
Yeah, there's no training program as such.
Okay.
It's more around how we are currently working on the product or whatever our core ecosystem is. We train them on certain levels on how the product evolved.
Okay.
So we let them run through that journey so that once they are through that process, they are aware of our entire context of the product as of now.
Very true. So do you also approach colleges for recruitment? Do you go for campus placement kind of a thing?
So unfortunately, given our tech
plans
stack,
in the coming years,
given our tech stack, freshers aren't an ideal fit for us, unfortunately, because even in JavaScript, we look for experienced people who have some end-to-end demonstration of, let's say, at least a 2 or 3 year working in, let's say, the end-to-end deployment of a product lifecycle. So then only we can have that as a base and train them on the next set of technical skills. We are definitely hiring interns, but again, it's not a full-time, let's say, position in that regards. We are hiring interns though, but that's more on the lines of, I would say, business development, sales, marketing, digital marketing, and on those aspects.
Right. Well, in the introductory remarks, I made a statement that Indian business, is very dynamic, and I would say we have seen 3 phases. The initial phase during the independence, then the second phase maybe during the 2000, where we also faced recession in 2009. The third phase, I would say, post-pandemic. Right. So it's always been volatile. Indian business has always been volatile. In general, keeping CloudWorks apart, how would you rate this Indian business scenarios? What is your thoughts on that?
To be honest, I've actually been a victim of one of these scenarios during our demonetization and the GST policy itself. So I wouldn't say the word victim, I would say, but it definitely impacted a lot of our revenue and cash flows during the Thinqbot days. So one thing that it at least taught me a lesson that most of our business and GTM strategies should be constructed in a way that if there is a policy change, it doesn't really kill the whole revenue source or doesn't really impact the source.
It's always there, the part and parcel, the business fluctuations are always part and parcel.
Yes, definitely.
Do you have any plans for diversification?
Definitely. We are looking at international markets quite seriously. And that's where we're seeing a lot of, I would say, an ease in converting the customer to. In India, we have a lot of, so in SaaS, we have a term for this called the free POC wali janta.
Okay.
So in India, we have this mindset, unfortunately, where even large enterprises want you to do a basic POC to at least help them understand the tangible benefits, and then when they'll take it up to a next phase project in that regards. But internationally, we're not seeing this trend. We are seeing a global acceptance and very easy level on how they can understand the benefits of digital twin and how we can easily convert them. So we are definitely focusing on the US, European, and even the Australian and the New Zealand market.
Did you benchmark any of the best ones of metaverse and the other countries?
So there are certain domains that we've identified which are picking up really well.
Is it?
So industrial automation and what they call the IoT 5.0 movement in some sense. That is one narrative that is picking really well in the European and the American markets. In US, lately there is another narrative around the whole decarbonization aspect. So there is a whole ESG narrative around digital twin that's also really picking up well. And if you look at other geographies, ANZ, for example, that way, over there, smart cities are really becoming a thing. And that's one thing that's pushed by the government of Victoria itself. So there are government-related grants and a lot of subsidiaries for startups in the smart city domain and digital twins. So it depends a lot on which geography is promoting which domain. For example, in Europe and particularly in Spain, the port industry is getting a very big impetus from the government. So that's one of the client domain that we are seeing a lot of traction in.
Okay. Japan has done fairly well in terms of industrial revolution. How about Japan and metaverse?
That's also one of the great markets. It's unfortunately that we don't have the right channel partners or the ecosystem players over there to exercise our network. We've been expanding into those markets where we found a connect, a reliable partner or a network, and then thereby through their strength we were able to expand into that geography.
Well, it also reminds me, India is a market which has a presence of many small and medium-sized players. Now, your product is tapping the large segments, or do you also have where the small and medium enterprises also can tap your product?
Yeah, we definitely have SME.
Have you approached tier 2, tier 3 cities in India?
Yeah. We are surprisingly having a lot of interest from a lot of these tier 2 cities where they have warehousing and a lot of these manufacturing plant setups. Ranchi being one of them, actually my hometown, Meerut also being one of those kind of setups where there's a big industry around sports manufacturing that is also exploring a lot of digitization solutions these days. So traditionally, these industries were very averse from any form of digitization because they had the mindset, chal to raha hai, so it's good in one sense. So, but now lately with a lot of these push around digitization and gladly the government is also giving them a lot of subsidies and incentives around that.
True.
So that's one more movement that I'm seeing, that tier 2, tier 3 towns which were famous for one or two of these offset industries, at least at SME level, they are seeing the push in digitization.
Correct, because my next question was that tier 2, tier 3 basically adapt some traditional methodologies.
Yes.
How is the acceptance level when it comes to such products?
Yeah, it was actually very difficult and it took longer than what we expected to convert them in the end.
But they are the bigger chunk of market in India actually.
Yeah. And they're actually one of the most loyal customers once they stick with you in some sense.
And if I can ask you, how about the affordability of this to the small and medium enterprises?
Yes. So we have to break it down for them in basically digestible chunks in that way. We cannot offer them the same rates and the same, I would say, the level of services that we offer to big name and big enterprises. So, but then again, it's a phased approach that we take with them. We take digestible sizes, we understand their budget, we understand their goals within that budget, and we try to see whatever we can work out for them within that budget and narrative.
So it's been more of B2B, I would say more of enterprise-based metaverse that you're doing.
Yes.
What's your plans when it comes to retail market, the customers, the individual customers? You have any plans there?
Yes, definitely. So we have a B2C solution in mind as well.
Which is launched or yet to be launched?
Yeah, it's yet to be launched.
I'll
be giving out a bit of spoilers, particularly in this podcast about the product.
Right.
So we've been talking about some of these spoilers over the past couple of months wherever I've been hosting in these public events. So we're going to name this product super3d.ai. Eventually, it's going to be a product where, let's say, any consumer, if you want to create a 3D website or a 3D landing page for your company, for your product or your store or whatever that regards. So it's sort of like a AI-based agent in some sense. You help it understand what kind of 3D environment you want to create and launch, and it basically creates a 3D world for you. And then you can edit it, play around and publish it as a web application and then share it across. So that's the consumer application that we'll be launching by Q2. We'll be calling it super3d.ai.
So who would be your initial target audience? I mean, which part of the city or any specific target segment?
So we're getting a lot of requests, surprising from jewelry stores on this.
Okay.
So jewelry stores and niche clothing stores who have, let's say, certain special clothing lines and expensive items to be, let's say, showcased in this regards. So that's one of the initial targets that we are launching this whole segment with.
Lovely. And you have a target kept for launching in the next couple of months?
Yeah, towards the end of July and August is what we are anticipating the first soft launch.
Awesome. I wish you the best for that.
Thank you.
Well, your journey has been really incredible, right?
Thank you.
And as I said, the real learning for the students lies beyond the four walls of the classrooms. And this is the exact platform for the budding entrepreneurs to listen from one of the best entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of budding entrepreneurs watching you out here. Any message that you want to pass on to them?
So I would say that this is the decade of the entrepreneur. We are now living in times where it's easier than ever to start your own business. There are a lot of opportunities out there in a lot of technologies that will really interest you once you get involved in that one. So take that leap, take that jump where you explore something, learn something, build something, and try it out, because it's one of the best times to try that out, and it will never be easier than this, I would say. So to all the budding startup aspirants out there, whatever is stopping you, I would say let that not consume you anymore and take that leap of faith. Thank you.
Great. The top 3 tips which you have inculcated in your journey, which you would like to share to them?
Yeah. Hard to pick the top 3, I would say, but definitely I would give some of the best, let's say, learning advices that I could think of from my journey in that regard. So, a decade plus of entrepreneurship. One of the biggest learnings that I've had is that you'll hear the whole notion of, it's lonely out there, it's all of those aspects and all that. You need to develop some thick skin around the practicality and the reality of what you're getting into. It will not be all, I would say, glorious and all media out there. 90% of the time, it will be a lot of hard work, a lot of grit. And that's one thing that is just the nature of this work. So once you accept that as a reality, and once you get used to it, it just becomes a process. So that's one big tip that I'd like to give to everyone, that understand or realize what you'll be getting into and accept that reality and learn to live with that reality. So second tip around that would be now in finding happiness in that reality.
Very true.
So that is very important, because in the end you are giving the prime years of your life into a motto or into a narrative. You want it to be worth something, and you want it to mean something to you internally, so that you are also fulfilled during that journey. Now, a lot of people say that happiness comes from passion, happiness comes from all those efforts. But to be honest, passion is just an aftermath of success. Happiness truly comes from putting in the effort and seeing yourself internally being rewarded from that effort. That's your first chain that you should just trace in that happiness, and passion and all those efforts are just an afterthought once you're really deep in that chain.
True.
So follow your effort, follow passion and happiness in that effort. Then you'll actually start discovering your true passion. Now, thirdly, keeping a level head and a well-balanced, I would say, psychological state during that entire period is very important.
Very true.
So again, happiness doesn't really mean you're doing psychologically well as well. A lot of people pretend to be happy but are very disturbed psychologically that way. So one good thing to balance out psychologically is to have a healthy sense of camaraderie with the people you're around with, have healthy relationships, healthy conversations with the people that are in your life, and make that as a regular practice. Have gratitude as one of the daily practices that you follow in your life. So that is one thing that a lot of people don't really, I would say, practice on a lot of bases, and people turn sour, and that sourness kind of eventually eats you up over a longer period of time. So
true.
Have a practice of gratitude, have healthy relationships, healthy conversations. So that will at least keep your psychological well-being in place. And once all these 3 pillars of advice, I would say, if you're able to follow this, the initial couple of gruesome years become really, I would say, it becomes easy to manage with, and you start appreciating this whole journey a lot more.
Great. I completely agree with you. Well, I have a personal question to you. Personal from my side.
Sure.
I'm very sure the journey, you wouldn't have it in a cakewalk or a green carpet or a red carpet, I would say. I'm sure there were a lot of ups and downs, a lot of challenges. At the same time, you need to manage. We have a beautiful word called as work-life balance. Can you throw some light on the work-life balance, or even of the health aspects? How do you manage your health? Because I'm sure you guys all are in the pressurous situation.
Yes.
How do you manage all that?
Definitely. So a lot of people say this, and I'd like to reiterate the same. Work-life balance when you're starting up, but especially when you're in the C team, it's often a myth. It's very difficult to strike the right balance because you're consumed by this idea the whole time. It's very difficult for you to have an off switch, because over the course of time, you won't be wired to have an off switch. So it's very difficult to find a true sense of work-life balance. It's just that you have to have a discipline around scheduling these aspects, when to, let's say, limit these aspects, when to have family, relationships, all those other aspects as part of this life. So it's the nature of disciplining work-life balance within that schedule, so that you give yourself the impression that you're having work-life balance. And that's one of the things that it's not like fake it till you make it, it's practice it till it becomes natural.
True. and you cannot compromise health as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And that again becomes a part of the routine then. So it's, at least for me, I live by my calendar. So if there is an event in the calendar, I follow it regularly. So I think it becomes a visual practice for a lot of people too. This could be another tip itself, where have these visual goals set for yourself, adjust it in your schedule so that you see yourself practicing them on a daily, weekly basis, and then it becomes natural to you.
Well, during my interaction with many of the young entrepreneurs, I often ask this question: when do you plan to retire? They say for 35, 40, 45. So as the last question, do you have any options for early retirement, or where do you want to see yourself?
Not really. I see myself as a creator. So I don't know the age when I will retire, but I see myself creating as long as I'm able to.
Great. That answers well. All right, so students and viewers, as I said, the real learning is always beyond the four walls of the classroom. And I'm very sure today you had loads of takeaways with the interaction with the young entrepreneur, Yuvaraj Tomar. I think who shared his journey so beautifully. On behalf of all the viewers and GIBS IRE Talks podcast, I would extend a heartfelt thanks to you. Thanks for making your time, boss.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
I wish everyone, I'm sure in this journey, I wish everyone that you take care of your health and never stop yourself from being very creative. And of course, at the end, don't forget to like, subscribe all our channels, GIBS Business School, GIBS IRE Talks. Keep watching this space. There's a lot of further information coming on your way. For a while, it's Guru Prasad signing off from the show. Thank you for watching.